It's Don here from the board. So this is a bit of an impromptu live stream that's happening right now because I had a bit of a work function and I got out early and I got home and obviously got a bit of time and freedom to do this. I'd actually put everything out and set it up ready because my wife and the daughter had gone out and then they just came home. So I'm still going to do it because obviously I've pulled everything out and I've set it up. I've barricaded the study so the little one can't get in and hurt herself with the chemicals and everything else. So we're still going to crack on regardless. But I do apologize in advance if there is a lot of baby screaming and wailing, if she gets upset because she can't get in here or anything else that's happening outside. For ventilation purposes, of course, I've actually got the door open to the study that way, but I don't actually have my windows open because the road noise would actually make this quite difficult to work with and hear. So what I'm going to be doing in this live stream and what I'm hoping to be doing is to be doing a preliminary cast to pull out any of the bits and pieces that are actually in the mold. Hey, Hushit, it's great to see you. You are the first person in this stream, so congratulations. Very impromptu video, of course, so if you're watching this on playback, I'm very sorry I didn't have time to sort of really pre-plan it because, you know, that's just how impromptu things go. So we're going to do a cast. We're going to try and pull out all the bits of the CX5 that's actually still remaining in the mold, all the grey bits that you can see in here. And then, depending on how we go with that, I'm going to, if I'm happy with how that turns out, I'm going to take the actual sculpt. So that's the original sculpt. It's the Merv, which is the 2017 Movember keycap that I sculpted earlier. You can see the video on how I made it previously. It's not coming into focus. Come on, you can do it. There we go. So there's the Merv with the lower lip there. And also the previous stream that I did, which was how I actually made this silicone mold using the Synth 2.0. So let's get cracking into it. So the first thing is the the resin that I'm using is a polyurethane resin because it's quick. It's quick reacting, it's quick curing, which will allow me to pull it out and check the mold before I move into the next step, which is going to be to attempt the cast. What I used was the same as what I did before when I did the video on casting these, the Dunzy cap, which never actually got anywhere because I haven't really had much time to do a lot of casting as the baby was coming along. So it's called Craft Cast. That's the product that I had previously. You can see there, Audax Craft Cast in white. It produces an off-white kind of product, and it's about sort of 3 minutes to react and about 15 minutes it pops out. Hey William, great to see you. Thanks for coming along and checking out the stream. Synth and Lego blocks, yeah, that's exactly what I used last time. However, this is really prone to picking up moisture. So what I mean by that is the Craft Cast Part B is this color. It's this color and it's liquid. You can see it. It's sealed in the bottle and you can see the actual vapor pressure has caused the bottle to collapse inwards, right? However, if you expose this to moisture over time, this is what happens to it. It crystallizes completely. It reacts with moisture in the atmosphere and it's completely unusable. So I've actually wasted half of my supply because this container is not airtight. So you have to be very, very careful about the products that you use and how you store it. Now, I actually don't know what the correct disposal is for my resin because you would naturally assume you're not going to have leftover resin. You're going to assume that it's actually going to create a product, and that product being the plastic, being the resin, the polyurethane, is much easier to dispose of compared to the liquid phase. Now, the Craft Cast, the other half, because it's two halves, I actually don't know if that's any good or not because it too is exposed to the air and moisture. So I'm not going to use these because obviously we're going to have a lot of issues. Even though there's still a little bit of liquid, it's kind of like a slush in there. So I'm going to set these down carefully somewhere else because we're not going to use them, but I just wanted to show you what happens when you leave it sitting around, okay? Now, of course, the outcomes of that means I actually have a lot less material to use for my casting than I anticipated, but you know what? That's just how life is. Now, previously, I had this set up which is just a bit of a safety setup in that I've got small containers inside that I'll pour resin into, and if I have any spills, it gets contained inside this large container. And all it is just a bit of bean sauce container, and it's just some 30 ml measuring cups, like medicine measuring cups. So nice and easy to work with. And that's just how it is in that cup. So the actual volume of this is probably going to be a couple of mil. Let me see if I got a ruler kicking around somewhere. Maybe not. Well, we know that the actual cap itself is it's about 19 mil by 19 mil, so 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters. So that's 4 square centimeters. So we're probably going to be looking at around it's about a centimeter deep or so, centimeter and a half deep. Probably about 8 mils. So 5 or 6 mil actually should be. She's gone in the bathroom.
I know she has. She's locked herself in.
The little one's gone into the bathroom and locked herself in because she pushed the door closed. The joys of having little ones. What are you doing? Honestly. It's because you can't come in here? Yeah, you can't come in here. So about 5 or 6 mil would actually be enough to fill that. So I'm probably going to have to use about that much to get that up to pull all the bits and pieces out of it. Okay, so I'm going to get my craft part B. So I've actually labeled my containers, so I'm never going to get them mixed up. I'm going to take my part B. Of course, this hasn't been open for a very long time, so hopefully the plastic's not going to fail and crack. I do have a bin over here, so that looks okay. And I'm going to give that a pour. Realistically, I only needed about 2.5 mil, but over pouring is a lot easier to deal with than under pouring. So I'll just leave the pipette out of that for the moment. Take out the other part. Close up this. Yeah, no worries, Hush. I'll see you back when you get back in 5 minutes. Then we have the other part. And a bit of dust in that. Shake that out. And give that a bit of a pour as well. Alright. Just gently put that down. Brace it against it so it won't go anywhere. And then of course, close up our containers. Alright. So we're kind of almost ready to go. I've just got a container, just a very simple container. It's like an old little yogurt tub kind of thing that I'm going to put in here. And this particular resin is a volumetric 1-to-1. It is not a weight 1-to-1. So you have to be very careful that you're actually using the right stuff in regards to how you measure it. And you can see on my pipette, I've actually got measurements here that I've got marked. So that's 0.5 mil, 1 mil, 1.5 mil. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go to the 1.5 mil on this one, and that way I'll get 3 mils in total, and we'll see how high that fills up. So one part in, going to suck that up to 1.5 mil. Make sure all of that's out. Get that back over there. And then also on this side, I've got those purple gradients so I can see it nice and easily. And I'm going to pull up 1.5 mil. So now once these go in, and that'll be the door, that'll be a delivery of probably my new mouse for work. Just a little bit of backstory on that. I have Dell mice at work, and I've broken 4 of them in 12 months. They're just horrible, nasty little things. Yeah, so I decided to order my own, and I'm going to claim it on tax because it's actually going to be a work deduction. So when I start mixing, it means I'm going to have about 3 minutes before it starts to actually cloud up and react, in theory, which means I can't really spend a lot of time tapping and getting out bubbles. You'll notice that I'm using a very thin rod here to mix because I'm trying to introduce as little bubbles as possible. I want to mix thoroughly and gently, but at the same time, I don't want to stir so hard that I'm beating air into it like I'm making, you know, pancakes or something like that. Now, William is saying, talking to a local artisan maker, uses syringes with exact amounts, but end up with extras. Could be a good way. So, syringes, yes, I have got syringes, but I don't have fine syringes, and pipettes are actually cheaper than syringes. I bought a 500 pack of pipettes because I'm relatively confident in using pipettes. They've got graduations, but I mark them with the pen just so I can see it easier. Syringes are a lot more expensive, and especially the small size ones. Big size syringes are cheaper because obviously there's less plastic in them, but that's just how it goes. So the problem with drawing it out of the bottle is trying to get into the bottom of the bottle. That's originally why I put them into those 2 bottles earlier that aren't airtight, so I could actually squeeze them out into how much I wanted, and of course that ended up quite disastrously, as I've since discovered. So I'm trying to get even mixing. Now, it's kind of hard to see in the video here, but you can still actually see little bit of like non-mixed trails, if that makes any sense, because one's clear and one's colored. You can kind of get that idea, but we're starting to hit sort of the time frame where I don't want to be doing too much more mixing, and I really want to be thinking about starting to pour. So I'm going to just finish that off, and then we're going to go in with the pour. Hopefully that is sufficiently mixed. Now that was 3 ml, and it's a pretty good fit. Look at that. It's almost right up to the top, which is excellent. And of course that was just a guesstimate based on experience, roughly. So not a fluke at all. Not a fluke at all. Now, because this is so fast acting, I'm also not really going to have a lot of opportunity to actually get any air bubbles out, which is an issue. But I don't really care, because for the purposes of doing this cast, I'm just interested in getting any of that residual CX5 out of my mold. Hey, Mendez! Cheers, mate. Coming along. Well, getting straight into it after work. Gotta make hay while the sun shines, right? What are you choking on now? Huh? Hey, Dee Dee. Thanks for coming along and checking out the stream. I'm just doing a bit of an impromptu casting. So I've actually done the mixing, and I'm hoping that I've mixed it relatively well. Now I'm just going to hold that right up to the camera and hope it's going to focus in. There we go. Now you can see how many tiny little bubbles I've actually managed to mix in there. It's a lot of bubbles. Now, if I had a pressure pot, what I could do obviously is I could bung it in the pressure pot really quickly, put in 40 psi, 60 psi of air, and all those little bubbles would just get squished down into nothing, and you wouldn't see them. Unfortunately, I don't have a pressure pot, don't have a compressor. This is really the only workspace I have, so for me to do that, it's not quite feasible. Now, in theory, this should start to cloudy up after about 3 minutes, but because the weather's a little bit cooler, it's probably going to take a little bit longer. So we're just going to let that sit. You can see that on the camera. And while we're waiting for that to cure, I'm going to start preparing my synths. Now, I say that plural because I've got 2. I've got the old one, which is over here. Yeah, in front of the camera would be good, wouldn't it? And then I've got the 2.0. Now, the 2.0 still has the sculpt on it, so I'm going to leave that for the moment until we see how the mold turns out. But I'm going to actually prepare the 1.0 because I can, and I might as well. And yeah, here we go. So the first thing is I'm just going to take off the old bits of tape that I had on there, only because the tape was there to bulk up the actual synth, make it run a little bit tighter, which I found, you know, a piece of masking tape on the edges helped with that. And then I'm going to re-lube the bits and pieces I need on it. Okay, so you can see it's starting to cloud there, right? It's going from the center mass and it's working its way out. So that's the actual reaction of the polyester in action, which is pretty cool. It's kind of taken its time. It's a pretty slow reaction, and you can see from the middle to the edges don't have as much contact with itself, so the reaction speed's not as fast or smooth, but it should gradually fill its way all the way out. In theory. Now, just like I did last time, what I actually have is I've actually got some Vaseline already sucked up into a syringe, and this is what I was talking about, William. I already have syringes. I just got fat 20ml and 25ml syringes, and I think at one point I actually had a couple of 50ml syringes. Originally I got them because I wanted to use them with silicone, but the viscosity of the silicone was just way too high. So I used this to dispense my Vaseline for the purposes of lubing my synth, which seems to work all right. So I use a another probe, just another fine point probe. This time it's just got a sharp edge on it, and that allows me to get into the holes and lubricate up the surfaces that I want. So all I'm doing is I'm just running Vaseline over the back surface, so any of the spillover is not going to bind too badly, and then I get it inside the actual center stem holes and I run it around just like that inside each of these sprue holes, so the resin that comes out through the sprue holes. Now you have to remember I'm using a solid material, the Vaseline, whereas it's highly recommended, especially by most artisan makers and binge especially, to use a spray release agent. Now the spray release agent they use, I could use, but because I don't have anywhere safe to spray it, I can't really spray it in here. It's just going to go everywhere, and I can't really do it anywhere else in my place. It's just going to go everywhere, and it's just not a good idea with the baby. So that's why I'm choosing to use a solid release agent. Okay, so I'm just gonna run it over the surfaces like so. Now I'm being quite liberal with this, but I will clean it up after I get it into everywhere that I need it to go into. So, but I think there's an Instagram video or something like that of Binge actually applying release agent to one of his synths, and I think he says in it, how do you know when you have enough release agent? And then he sprays it some more. and he just sprays and sprays and sprays. Because they're using the spray, it's very fine, it's very thin, so it won't really affect the cast. But because I'm using an actual solid, it's a lot harder for me to do that. So I actually have to scrape the excess off. And I'm just going to put that down because I don't need it. Put that sideways. And as you can see, I use a lot of toilet paper for this because it's a convenient size to actually clean stuff with. So I'm just going to take some of that excess off, if it'll stay down. And naturally, you'll notice I'm also wearing gloves, so PPE is very important. I got ventilation. Vegetable oil. Okay, so I tried coconut oil, and I found that coconut oil was really interesting because I could spray it. I've got some coconut oil in a can, but it is actually really tight. It is very difficult to break free from the mold. I don't know if that's an effect of the oil itself. And at one point the oil was kind of reacting with my resin and I didn't really like how it was turning out, so I stopped using that. Brushing, yes, but you need probably a really fine oil, because if you don't have a fine oil, then it will actually make some parts potentially loose, or you might get uneven actual surfaces. So it's just something to be aware of. I'm not saying not to use it. If you're getting really great results, then fantastic. Don't stop doing what you're doing. Just personal experiences, and of course your mileage may vary. Rightio. Let's take off the excess on the back. Flip it back around. Now you can see the actual cast here has actually gone all the way, my Asian accent coming out there, all the way around to the edges. So now I'm just cleaning up. You can't see it because once again, it's off the camera. It's really hard to do. If you've never actually live streamed something on a bench before, subconsciously you want to hold stuff up so you're easy to work with and see, but you've really got to be able to do it where it's visible, obviously. Otherwise people are like, we can't see what you're doing. So I'm just using the straight edge of my my probe here, and I'm just running it across to pick up any of that excess on the straight edge and then clean it off. So just the straight edge, straight up. I'll rotate it, straight edge, scrape it up against it. That's the other reason why I kind of was a little bit not sure about using the Synth 2.0, because it's aluminium versus the steel, where I have relative confidence in being able to use metal tools against it without an issue, without damaging it. So hopefully the aluminium is going to hold up to that same sort of level of standard that I'm used to messing around with. So now my original synth is ready to go for the base, and then we're going to prep the actual stem. So prepping the stem is going to be interesting because I do need to apply some tape if I want a good alignment to it, and then I also have to grease in between. So what I got to get is a pair of scissors. Gloves are still clean, which is always nice. Trusty pair of scissors, and I got a bit of tape. So I'm going to snip the tape to about the height I want. Tape the tape back to my desk, and then let's start taping it. So just like I did last time when I did this kind of activity and stream, I just tape it to the edge like that, and then I snip it. So just like that, and then obviously I break that off, and then I go to the next one, press that down, and this one's already coming off because it's been in contact with the Vaseline. Let's try and tape that side down. Now, there might be some criticism about the fact that there's such poor tolerances, but at the same time, it's not really that poor a tolerance. It's pretty good, but because of how fine the actual tolerance is required on a keycap stem, the alignment is really hard to get. Yes, you could pay for much better alignment in your manufacturing, but what that comes with, of course, is the price. The price tag is always going to be high when you want high quality machining. So in order to make the synth actually affordable, I think they pretty much just went with, well, we can get this level of tolerance with this, and we're going to get it at that price point. Otherwise, unless if you want to be paying double, triple, quadruple in price, you're just not going to reach that kind of tolerance that you're probably wanting. And that's also the reason why actual professionally manufactured keycaps, like from Signature Plastics or whoever, the molds are quite expensive because of the fact that they are very high tolerance, manufactured, tooled, CNC'd molds and so forth. Hey, Outrage Pudding, fantastic. Well, good morning. I hope you're going to have a fantastic day. And Jolly Green Giant, oh, hi there indeed. So it's just a bit of an impromptu live stream on casting, and now you can see that's completely gone edge to edge, but I don't know if it's firm enough yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to poke it, because it's the only way that you're going to know if it's firm enough. Now, because this is not actually a final production cap, it technically doesn't matter. And I'm going to poke that, and you can hear it. It's pretty firm, but it's still a little bit soft. I can make dents in it quite easily. So you can see there's bubbles already in that surface, but that's from the mixing. But you can see, for example, over there's a big fat dent that I just made using this probe. So we're just going to let it sit for a few more minutes, and then we can check it out and see if I'm going to actually pull this apart or not. So now that I've gone and stuck the tape there, just like I did before, I'm going to use my syringe, and then and then I'm going to fill in these side bits with a bit more Vaseline just for extra lubrication. Now, D, you're talking about me getting a 4K cam. That would be pretty cool. So Pete uses what's called the Brio. It's the Logitech 4K cam. It's a couple of $100 US. I think it ranges close to 300 US or something like that. It's a heck of a beast of a camera, but it is currently out of my budget. Now, we have actually been talking about this on our podcasts, and we did talk about this last time on the live stream about a Patreon. I just haven't actually gone to the extent of setting one up and thinking about it. And I was going to talk about this weekend in our podcast because we had a really good suggestion from one of our listeners. And Wallop is their Reddit name. He was saying that one of the things about trying to set up any sort of crowdfunding is having very defined and distinct goals. And that piece of tape is not sticking at all. And we currently don't have any really defined goals about where we want to go with our money if we were to fundraise. So I think we need to kind of sit down and think about that part first before we put down a Patreon account. And then that might really help us assess the need. And the second part, of course, is we still don't know what we can offer to people for a Patreon account. Now, we don't want to make our content elitist. So we don't want to have stuff that's restricted only for people who have a Patreon account of any variety. But where does that leave us? You know, we don't obviously generate any money to speak of for the purposes of making t-shirts and fun things to give away, even though that Idea 23 have come on board to help sponsor us by paying what is our hosting costs. So we haven't really had much feedback from people about the podcast on what they would be interested in actually paying in a Patreon. So your feedback would be really great. If you have ideas on what you'd like to see from a Patreon, then by all means, please let us know. So, all right, so I've just gone and lubed up the actual crucifix here. And while I'm in the process of doing that, I'm going to do that with the Synth 2.0 as well. I'm going to do exactly the same thing, but I'm going to do it without the tape because there is actually a much finer tolerance on this. And I don't want to go through the tape part unless if it's absolutely necessary, which we will find out how it goes. So, Dee, loving streams and videos, learning a lot, want to give back. Well, really appreciate the feedback. And, that means a lot to us, that you love our content, that you think that you're learning a lot. For now, I guess your support, your continued support, the fact that you keep watching is really as good as we're going to be able to get. But if you do want to make donations and contributions, you always can. We do have a PayPal Me link available somewhere. I think it's on our main podcast page as well, that you can make contributions to if you wish to. So how is everybody's Friday morning, Thursday night, wherever you are in the world? I don't even know where everybody's coming in from. I do know some of the guys who are regulars, which is really great. But I don't know if you've actually... have you been on our stream before, Dee? Because I don't recall seeing your name before in chat. I do apologize if you have been before and I just haven't been able to catch it with some of the messages that fly around sometimes. Link. I think it's just like paypal.me.theboardpodcast.com. But if you go to our actual podcast page, which is www.theboardpodcast.com, you'll see a bunch of links floating around at the top, including our RSS feed, our iTunes, as well as I think that actual PayPal Me thing, which is what I'm kind of talking about. You lurk a few times. Okay, well, it's great that you're actually getting involved because that's exactly what we're after. We want people to get involved. There's no problems with lurking. If you're shy and whatnot and you don't want to sort of publicly make yourself visible, that's fine too. When I first joined the community, I was a very big lurker because I was still trying to learn, and all I did was I just read threads, I read comments, I read the wiki, you know, and just got my information that way until I was confident enough to actually get out there and get involved. So make sure that, you know, you do get involved. And once you get to a certain point there, you're comfortable. There's no need to lurk and hide. Community is pretty great. Isn't that right, everybody else? You watch all the YouTube videos. Ah, well, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I mean, right now we're at like 740 odd subscribers, which is incredible. In the space of a week since I announced that we hit 700 subscribers, we've actually gained almost 50% to 800, which, you know, is just, it's insane. Absolutely insane. So now I'm just trying to clean up the bottom of this crucifix so I can get a good stem fit on it. Whoo-wee. Okay. Now, I did talk about this in my other video when I reviewed this, but the actual crucifix is slightly different this time around. If we look at the old one versus the new one, try and get it up close. I don't know if it's gonna, there we go. Oh, no, it's lost focus. There we go. You'll notice their construction is slightly different. The 2.0 is a lot simpler. It doesn't have the grooves and channels and the lift points. So I don't know exactly what the executive decisions were in getting rid of them, but hopefully it will actually pop out just as easily as they did before. Okay, so the stem is lubed. And now we're going to go back and try poking this again. How hard is it to dent? Looks pretty good. I'm relatively satisfied with that. So here is the test. It's separate, okay? It's lifted clean off the sides, which is great. And there we go. Alrighty, so it took a good amount of them out, so you can still see there's still quite a bit of grey stuff in there, but that's okay. But at the same time, this first cast, I'm going to orientate it this correct way. Come on. Also took quite a bit out, so you can see that it's speckled all over with the grey bits from the CX5. So I think that was successful. I'm quite happy with the shape because all the features seem to have come out. It's got that sort of roughness of the mustache, and it's even got my dodgy maker's mark written on the side there. So I've actually carved into it. I don't know if it's going to focus. There we go. So it actually says RAG 2017 on it. RAG being my cat brand, rough as guts. And of course it's the year 2017 for this Movember cap. All right, so I'm pretty happy with that, which means this sculpt is going to go bye-bye. So let's break it off, the actual top of this. It's no going back now once it comes off, if I can get it off. Ooh. It's starting to. All right, so we're just going to use a bit of a tool to help us get that off. Now, I did talk about the medium that I'm using before. I use CX5. I do have a mix of CX5 with this, and it's a mix of hard and soft. So you can see how when I just took it off, it's actually fractured. It's cracked off, and that's because there's a bit of the hard in that as well. Hey, how's it going, Brendan? Did your keycap arrive? I've been really anxious about this because since you told me the other week that you haven't received it yet, I'm kind of worried. Has it turned up? If it hasn't, I don't know what to do since it went untracked just in regular mail. Of course, there's the delay, and then there's typing, and there's all that, so we're just going to chill out in silence while I keep taking bits of this off. Try and do it on camera. Not make it fly everywhere. There we go. There's the rest of the actual sculpt is just broken right off there. So and there's the dent that's gone down the center stem. And of course, I keep my bits and pieces so I can reform it, reuse it into the next sculpt that I do. whatever it may be. It finally came. Oh, I am so relieved to hear that. I really, really am. I hope you like it. I hope it fits well on your keyboard in some capacity. And if it doesn't, I guess it'll just sit on, I don't know, maybe an Artisan stand or collection or something like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use another blunt probe, and then I can poke it through the holes and get out the actual CX5 that's in that. Because obviously I need those holes for my excess resin to sprue out of. Alrighty, so all those bits have come out. It's really hard to work in a very small space, as you can see, but I'm kind of used to it. It's just a little bit hard to do when you're live streaming because you're trying to keep everything in view. So yeah. Now talking about that 4K camera, that 4K webcam, as well as the fact that Pete actually has like a Sony video camera that he uses for his setup, which is pretty cool. I don't know if my computer can handle it. My computer's not exactly a high-end rig, so I know he uses a particular sort of video capture device. It's all in his links that he's got where he shows his live streaming kit, which is also pretty nifty. But it's quite an investment that Pete's made into it, and it certainly pays off. But Pete streams a lot more prolifically than I do. I don't think he's got kids. I think he might have a cat, so maybe that's part of the reason. And I don't have anything against cats at all. I used to cat sit for some people, some friends of mine, many, many years ago, while I was working with them for them. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing as I did before, and I'm going to just apply my Vaseline method onto this Synth 2.0, and we can compare apples to apples. So let's get that all in, lube up the inside of this well, lube up the front, lube up the sides, lube up the platform, my sprues. Just forgetting to show that on camera. It's yeah, the mustache is very mustachy. Well, I'm glad it is, because that was the intent. Now, of course, if you are relatively new to this stream and what Movember is all about, I would urge you to check it out. Movember, the Movember Foundation, has been going on for many, many years now. The concept of Movember is to raise money for men's health, because everybody, in some sense, has a biological father. Now, I'm not knocking non-traditional families or anything like that, but biologically speaking, you would have had a father, even if it's not your actual family father figure, if you want to call it that. And you probably have brothers, uncles, you know, best mates. Essentially, almost half the world could benefit from Movember. The money that they've raised goes towards things like, you know, prostate cancer research. It goes into treating and research into men's health issues, testicular cancer, into, you know, men's depression, and so on and so forth, because there's a lot of wide issues that men just don't want to talk about. They just try and hide it because it's not manly. It's not the right thing to do, you know. Big boys don't cry, that kind of attitude. And to be honest, it kills a lot of men because they just don't want to deal with it. So the Movember Foundation helps fund a lot of programs, and if you check out their website, you'll actually find all the programs that they've been involved with and how much money they've raised and donated to each of these causes, which is, you know, fantastic. And I want to be here for my daughter when I get older, as I get older, and so I try to do my best to help out the foundation, because what happens with the foundation and their results could positively affect me in the future. All right, so I'm a bit of a skinflint, so any of the excess that I'm taking off, I'm just trying to suck back into the syringe. Because you know what? Waste not, want not, right? And, well, especially with these caps, I'm not actually going to be making any profit off these. So, but at the same time, I probably shouldn't spend too much time because it's your really important time that you've taken out to watch this. So I'm just going to get that back in. Whoop. All right, so now I'm just going to clean up again like I did before. Been waiting on it for 3 hours. Your download. What are you downloading, mate? 3 hours. Sounds big. Nothing too illegal, I hope. I play a bit of PUBG, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, and last night they had a patch, and one of my friends forgot to actually turn on their Steam, and so, hey Chris, no worries. Have a great Friday. Woo! Just dropped that, and thankfully it bounced on the table. Have a great Friday, and yeah, I'll catch you later. Rainbow Six Siege, 27 gigs. Okay, wow, that's definitely a long download. But yeah, so my mate was like, oh, he wanted to play with me and another friend, but he had to wait for the patch and it was taking forever because everybody else was patching at the same time. And so remember, kids, if there are updates, patch early if you can, not just before you want to get on, because going to be disappointing people while you wait. Okay, so I've cleaned that up, and for the first cast, I think we're going to be good to go. Now, here's the challenging part. Before, I used to put about 1 mil into the mold, and then I would push this in, the excess would flow up. I don't actually know how much I'm going to need for the 2.0 because the actual structure is slightly different in the shape. So I'm still going to go with 1 mil to start off with and see how we go. Hopefully 1 mil is going to be enough. Maybe I'll go with, well, 2 mil is probably going to be way too much. So you know what, I'm going to go with 1 mil and we'll see. And then if needs be, I might have to relube. Of course, the orientation is very important. Now you'll notice that there are squares and rectangles in the mold. So the orientation should be that way because it's going to be rectangles on rectangles. And it should just slot in just like that neatly, because if you got squares and rectangles, it's not going to work. So we're going to go that way. We're going to put that aside and get our mixing container again, our mixing rod again, and it's time to suck up about 0.5 mil. Get that down. There's 0.5 mil. Just trying to get all of it out of that pipette to get as close as I can to an accurate measurement. Blow that out. I'm going to suck up 0.5 mil. Drip that down. And the timer is going to pretty much start. So gently put that. And let's get mixing. Mix, 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 mix. Mix, 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 mix. You're going to retreat to playing Siege. Well, good luck. Try not to get shot too much. I haven't actually played a Rainbow Six title in ages. I'm not even sure what it was that I played. It was definitely a Tom Clancy one, but it was really hard because you had to be a lot more tactical. Couldn't be gung-ho. You'd take one bullet and you were pretty much dead. But these days, yeah, PUBG and League is mostly what I play. I do play, I suppose, a little bit of just random games that I have, depending on who's pulling me in. Sometimes on Friday nights with my D&D friends, I play Talisman, which is the digital version of the ye olde classic board game, Talisman, which we kind of grew up playing in school. So that's pretty nifty. Yeah, well, it looks like it's actually fairly even, which is really great. Now, with any kind of resin mixes that you do, the more mass you have, typically the faster reaction. So because I'm only mixing 1/3 of what I mixed before, it might actually be slower in reacting, which is cool, which is good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold that. I'm going to pour this in as gently as I can, I guess. You know what? I mil is probably not enough. That was a bad decision. Just by looking at it, that mil went nowhere. Look at that, the mil just did nothing. Okay, so the sculpt is a lot deeper than I thought it would be, and that's okay, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait for that to harden up, and because I haven't actually put my synth in it, I can mix a lot more, and then we'll try that again. I do apologize for that, for people who are still chilling out here watching. So William, I don't know if Harshit's back or not, and I actually don't know who else is still chilling out here, but thanks for hanging around. So I guess we're just going to wait a couple of minutes for that to harden up. Yeah, so anything planned for you guys on the weekend? I don't think there's terribly much going on for me as such. Now that's turned actually really firm, which is great. It's hardened up nicely. It hasn't sort of Rice Krispied, so obviously the moisture content in my main bottles is actually still okay. So it can just go into the pile over there. Eucharius, welcome. Hello. Where do you hail from? I actually don't know where Dee Dee hails from either. So, obviously, most people probably know that I hail from Sydney, Australia. G'day, mate. Fancy a bit of a Vegemite sandwich? Or a bit of a sausage sizzle? A sanger? Of course, chucking on me old accent, me old ochre. A lazy weekend, hey? I got a birthday thing to go to tomorrow, having buffet lunch at the local RSL, because it's my brother and my sister-in-law and my niece's birthday all coming up. So my mum just went, you know what, I don't want to cook. We're going to go to the RSL and have buffet for lunch and celebrate everybody's birthdays. Texas, hey? UK, 2 a.m. in Texas and 8 a.m. in the UK. Wow. Well, thank you very much, Eucharius, for actually hanging out at 2 a.m. What are you doing up at 2 a.m.? Shouldn't you be in bed? Do you work night shift or something like that? Or is it just you got notification that we were streaming and thought, you know what, I'm going to stay up for this? Which, of course, if you've done so, thank you very much. I'm not really too much of a buffet kind of guy these days compared to when I was younger, simply because I don't eat as much as I used to. I lost about 10 kilos 2 years ago from walking to work, and I've been sort of trying to keep it down a little bit healthier, eat less, eat a little bit better most of the time. So in my younger years, especially when I was a lot more active doing sports and stuff like that, I would just go to a buffet and devastate whatever I could. But these days, buffet value is just not. Can't sleep. Now, is that normal for you that you can't sleep, or is it just particular instance? It's something weighing on your mind? You can always talk here with Dr. Don if you don't mind random strangers finding out about your woes later on, of course. Not that I am qualified, not that any advice that I give is certified and should of course be taken with a very, very large handful of salt. Man, this is a long 3 minutes for this to cure. It's probably going to take longer simply because it's that smaller mass that I'm talking about. But it is thickening, so as I'm tilting it, it's definitely thickening. It's not moving as easily as it used to. See, Dee Dee's laughing, but in my circle of friends, I actually picked up the nickname Granny. People would call me Granny Don because I would give really good advice, really good sort of motherly advice. I'm a lot older than a lot of the people that I hang with simply because of the activities that I do. So because I used to do a lot of archery and I was also in kendo and I was like a senior in the club, we would have a lot of new students coming in. So I would be literally a 10-year generation gap between some of them. And so I had a lot more life experience, both in relation to the actual activity as well as things like study and work and relationships and being an adult in general, you know, managing money and mortgage and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, you get to know people, they get to be good friends and they trust you and they ask you advice. And I picked up the nickname Granny. So, but as for sleep schedules, I have a pretty bad sleep schedule myself, so I know exactly where you're coming from. Yeah. I try to go to bed around 10. I wake up at 5 for work, and I bumble my way through the day hoping that I don't collapse in front of my computer or fall asleep during meetings. But I've had sleep studies done. There's a picture of me hanging around somewhere that I've uploaded somewhere in my old blog where I've got electrodes all over my head and stuff, and they put a thermistor under my nose, and I went and did a sleep study at one of the actual sleep research centers where they watch you overnight in infrared camera, and they monitor your brain waves, your breathing rate, your turning and your tossing and stuff like that. And essentially they told me that there was nothing actually wrong with me physically, but my brainwave activity was not very clean for the purposes of going to sleep. So you have alpha and beta waves. I can't remember which one's which, but the pattern of shifting between one to the other indicates your light sleep to deep sleep. So what had happened was when they were measuring my alpha and beta waves, it was taking me 3 times as long to go from light sleep into my first deep sleep REM cycle. And so because of that, I wasn't actually getting as many sleep cycles in a 8-hour sleep period compared to normal people, and therefore I don't get restful sleep. I sleep, but I'm sleeping in light sleep a lot longer and a lot more. And if something wakes me up or breaks my actual deep sleep, once again it resets, and it takes me that 3 times as long to fall into that deep REM cycle. So that's why my sleep is shot. And they said, there's nothing that you can really do about it from a big picture, unless if I wanted to take medication that would sort of just like crash me to sleep, like sleeping tablets and stuff like that, which I didn't really want to do. So I deal with it only in the sense that I've had it for so long that I'm used to it. But what are the long-term effects? I don't know. We'll just have to see how it goes. Now, I don't know if my daughter's asleep or not. It's afternoon nap time, you see. And she's been out, so now you can see once again, the middle of that's actually clouding up. It's definitely taken a lot longer to react than the larger cast, simply because there's a lot less mass in there. So we're just going to keep chatting and babbling. You can come in if you want. It's fine. Oh, I don't know. What do you want to do for dinner?
I have meat in the fridge, so
Okay.
cook that.
Uh-oh. What's uh-oh about? Yeah, right. It's not good to get hooked on sleeping pills. Natural remedies, warm milk and cookies and all of that kind of stuff. It's not that I can't fall asleep, because I fall asleep really easily. I fall asleep on trains and on buses. I don't fall asleep on planes, though. That's really weird. And I get people going, how can you sleep on the train? Aren't you afraid of getting robbed or something? And I'm like, nah, what are they going to steal from me? A potato phone? My bag has no value in it. And the only thing that's important, is my wallet, which is in my pocket. And if someone tries to pickpocket me because I'm a light sleeper, I'm going to wake up. But for some reason, I think it's just the noise and the vibrations of a plane, just that constant vrrr when you're actually flying, that actually stops me from falling asleep. Natural stuff, yeah, I've had teas, I've had Chinese herbal medicines and all that kind of stuff. And like I said, it's not the falling asleep, it's the stopping my brain from being so active about it. Vitamins. Oh, okay. Look at that. That's it's all stretchy. It still hasn't fully hardened yet, so I can't take it out yet. I know that, for example, if you get cramps in your sleep, you should be taking things like magnesium more, because that is what your body is lacking if you get like sleep cramps. But I don't know what other vitamins would potentially help sleep. We'll find out, I suppose, if we do a bit more research into it. Come on, harden up. Just trying to speed this up so you guys aren't getting a little bit bored watching this. I don't know. Now, we have been in talks with Top Clack very lightly, very briefly, about doing crossovers. So if you do watch Top Clack, you would know about this because you would have seen Kevin on their episode last week. If you don't watch Top Clack and you don't know what Top Clack is a video stream that they do on Twitch. It's typically Thursday night about 6 or 7 PST time, Seattle time, which Brian and Huey and Bektor, when he's around, hang out, talk keyboards, and usually they'll have a guest. And then they do put video on demand on YouTube as well. And recently they've just started hosting audio only versions of their sessions, of their episodes on Podbean. So Podbean being a platform for hosting podcasts, which is different to what we use. We use Libsyn, they use Podbean. So melatonin, that's really interesting. Yeah, well, melatonin is it's related to obviously sun hitting your skin. So you develop melatonin, that's where you get the tan, and the breakdown of melatonin in your skin through circulation. And they talk about melatonin being a regulator of sleep. So if you have really poor sleep behavior from jet lag or different light conditions, melatonin can assist with that. That said, I have not tried melatonin. It's not something I've gone out to look for, so I don't know if it would do much for me. It might. Never know. I've also tried meditation, a bit of Zen, a bit of deep breathing, but once again, all of that helps me fall asleep, but it doesn't help me with my quality of sleep. So now I'm poking this, and you can see how soft it still is. I'm just leaving big fat dents in it. I'm just constantly testing and pulling on this because I'm trying to see when it's going to separate from the sides. Is there a Binge and ETF crossover soon? You've seen some sneaky pics on Binge's Snapchat. Yes, there is. There is a Fugu Thulu that is coming out, from what I believe. It looks like it's a Fugu head with a Skull Thulu kind of tendril thing. When is that going to happen? I don't know. I don't know if it's ETF that's actually casting it or if Binge is casting it, but it's definitely looking like a collaboration. I too have seen the pictures, but I actually don't know any more than that. Oh my god. Yes, oh my god. Two of the biggest makers in the community pulling out the stops. The only thing that I'm kind of concerned about is, depending on the volumes that they make this in, is the flipping in the community. Can I explain the process of creating an artisan? Can you elaborate on that question? Because that's very open. When you say creating an artisan, are you talking about 100% from scratch, or what I've been doing in this video, or in... Need just a little bit of clarification, please. You're down for 2 of the 4x4. Oh, that's pretty cool. I think Binge was really spot on when he created the concept of the 4x4, being able to give you the colorway choice but leaving the artistic freedom for Hungerworks Studio to actually do what they wanted to do with those colors. What I've been doing now, so in this video specifically, or in this series of videos, so now you can see how it's actually cleanly lifted off the side, which is what I was looking for, which means I can now try and prise it up. Excellent. The actual process of making the cap. Okay, so that does or does not include the sculpting part. And of course, just for a bit of fun, there is the front of that cap, that face. Bring it up to the camera. Are you gonna focus? Come on, get in focus. Stop focusing the background. There we go. So you can see it's pulled out even more of that grey stuff, which is kind of good. And this is actually really soft and squishy, and you can see how I'm able to deform it like a bit of chewing gum. Nebula and Red Giant. Ooh, I've seen some of the Red Giant stuff actually. That looks pretty cool. So that was 1 mil. You know what? I'm gonna mix up 3 mil in here, and then we're gonna see how we go, because 3 mil is enough to fill the whole block, so we are going to have excess, and that's okay. That's okay. What I will do is I still have, sorry about that disappearance, I still have my mold for that Dunzy cup. So any excess, I'm just going to dump in here because I can. It's a little bit dusty. It hasn't seen a lot of love recently. Just getting rid of some of that that dust. Where am I going to put it? Let's put it there. Okay, so the actual process of making the cap, Eucharis. So I suppose if I want to start all the way from scratch, is I get the synth, I put sculpting clay on it, sculpting medium on it, and then I actually sculpt and form the cap on the synth. Then I do a Lego box mold. So I get the mold, I form a Lego box. So here's one I prepared earlier. That's the actual outside frame of the box. It's just Lego bricks formed in a box. What I do is I put tape on the bottom of it, and then I drop the synth inside it with the actual sculpt. I fill it with silicone, and then I let it set. I pop out the mold, and there we go. We have the mold, which is what we see exactly here. We take out the synth, and then we take the sculpt off the synth if we were going to reuse the same synth. Now, if you had multiple synths and you were really rich, you could just permanently keep it on the synth. However, I want to talk a little bit about off-casting. But before I do that, I'm actually going to measure and start mixing because I can talk about the off-casting while I mix. So we're going to go with 3 mils. So we're going to suck up 1.5 mil. And for William, this is also another reason why it's really good to pour excess, because it means if you do run into instances, you're still going to have enough without having to pour out more. So there's my 1.5. Gently put that back. And got some bubbles. Get rid of that. And we're down to my 1.5. All right, so the concept of off-casting is that you create a master. You create a really good master. And in this instance, for example, this is my master mold. This is my master mold, which means as long as this is healthy, I can create caps off it. But at some point in time, that's going to deteriorate. So I want to actually create a master sculpt, because then I can use that master sculpt to constantly cast more master molds. And it's a very common practice. So what you can do is what's called off-casting, where you actually cast a cap to cast more molds off. This is really smart because when you cast it in a resin material like this, the resin material, once it hardens and cures fully, is a lot more durable and a lot firmer than your actual sculpting medium. And then you would use that particular master cast, which is going to be one of the very first that you ever cast out of your master mold, because it's going to have the least imperfections. Because the more you cast, the more you wear the mold, the more tears and cracks and splits are going to form, which means you're going to lead to deterioration of detail on your actual cast. So what makes it really interesting, hey Joseph Clark, thanks for coming along. What makes it really interesting about using the synth is you'll notice how there's these holes and there's this platform where the actual synth sinks into it. So in theory, if you wanted to, and you poured a lot more resin into it, you can make your master sculpt include that synth base. So in the future, when you actually cast the molds from your master sculpt again, you don't actually even need a keycap on the synth base because it's already included in the mold. Okay, Now, I know that there are actually some artisan makers who do that, not necessarily with their synth based, but with their original casting mold base, which means it allows them to actually reproduce a mold over and over and over again, so that either they can preserve their mold quality or so they can do big runs. Because if you make 6 molds, then you can cast 6 caps simultaneously. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour about half of that in now that I've actually mixed enough. So I'm going to pour about half. Okay, just going to wipe the excess off there. It's just going to hang out on the side for the moment. And then I'm going to drop my synth in, and we're going to see how much it wells up. All right, so you can see the actual resin has kind of just come up. Oh, I don't think the camera is showing it very well, but there's a bit of that gleam in the middle. So what's happening there is the actual resin has welled up into the middle, which is kind of what we want. And now I'm going to pour into the middle, just drop by drop. It's starting to thicken already, so that's means I need to work a little bit faster. Okay, so I've just filled up that middle well. Oh, I definitely need to work fast. Otherwise this is going to go, hey, pear-shaped. So that middle well is filled, as you can see, and now it's time for the crucifix before it starts to harden. Come on, crucifix, get in there. Why are you not going in? There we go. And I'm going to give that a press. Now you'll see how it's actually come up through the some of those side vents as well. And that's exactly what you want, because it means the actual sprues are doing their job. So we've got one on the bottom, one on at the 3 o'clock position. It looks like the one at the sort of 10 o'clock position's also welled up. And now we're just going to let that sit. So about 3 mil was more than I needed, because you can see over here on the left where I'm pouring the excess into this Dunzy cap. It's starting to turn into like a honey consistency now, because it's starting to thicken. The work time from mixing is 3 minutes before it gels. That's the actual term that they call it, gelling. Because once it gels and it becomes unpourable, then you're going to be in trouble. So now you can see it's actually sort of blobby on my probe, which means I probably should clean it off before it starts to harden up as well. You are pretty new to mechanical keyboards. Anyone willing to help some? Well, as Eucharius is saying, what do you need help on? Let's have a look. I'm generally new, wanting to learn more about keyboards, how they work, got a Magic Force, and what mods would be good. Okay, well, I think the first question to ask when you ask that kind of thing is, what are you looking for from your mechanical keyboard? What are you looking to experience? What are you looking to achieve? Is it a purely visual thing? Is it a feel thing? Is it an audible thing? These kind of questions need to be answered before you can get really good direction on where you want to go with your keyboards. And Eucharius is saying that exactly. Do you want to change the feel of the switch? Do you want to change the look? And it's not that hard. It's pretty true. It's not technically that hard. But if you're new, of course, everything's hard when you're new, because you don't know anything. And then you come to a really great community, and hopefully that really great community will help you out. So now we're back to the waiting game, and I've dropped that in. I'm just giving it a gentle press to make sure that's seated correctly. So the tolerances on that was actually really firm, in that I couldn't loosely drop it in like I had previously been able to with the original synth, which is great. So I'm hoping that alignment is going to be spot on. Now, while we wait for that, I'm actually going to go to my box of goodies off screen and grab an Allen key, because that Allen key is really important to be able to get my bits popped out. Now from memory, I think it was this particular one. We'll see and give it a test. Yes. Okay. So you can see it it fits in pretty well. And the reason why I use an Allen key is because it's got a long bar handle on it. As you can see there, I can get a couple of fingers on it, so I can actually pull the stem out with. And because Allen keys are very, very tough, the metal and the actual physical size and construction makes it worthwhile. I have tried to use a screwdriver before, and I actually bent the screwdriver. So screwdriver no, Allen key yes, and oh, it might not fit this synth. It looks like they might have made the hole smaller. Bastards! They made the hole smaller. Now, why would you want to do that to me? I do have another Allen key, which is the next size down. But obviously then we're going to be compromising its strength because it's smaller, but it does fit. So I'm going to be attempting to use that one. That's a bit disappointing. Okay, so Joseph is saying, going to definitely desolder switches so I can take off the faceplate and carbon wrap it. Get some white stickers for the keycaps. Ooh, sticker bombed it and changing the spacebar for something heavier. Oh, okay. Just be careful with vinyl stickers because if your keycaps are ABS, vinyl doesn't necessarily stick very well to ABS. Probably doesn't even stick that well to PBT either. So over time, potentially, you might find that your stickers will slide and shift and move. And especially if you live in a hot climate, the adhesive can get soft. It'll lose its tack and therefore it might actually come off. So that's just a couple of issues to be concerned about if you're trying to put vinyl on top of keycaps. As for changing out switches, as Eucharis is saying, switches are very personal in preference. If you like the brown and you want something heavier, then you can go to something like the cherry grays, the tactile grays, because they've got a heavier spring in it. Otherwise, if you don't actually want to buy more switches, you can always open up your switches and mod them by changing out a heavier spring. So you're still going to get the brown stem sensation, depending on how scratchy or smooth you feel it is. Personal preferences, how sensitive your fingers are. But you can change them out for 80, 100, 110, 120, 210 gram springs. And that way it'll actually give you the feedback that you're after. Now, as we're talking, you can see how this is actually turning white. So it's curing, which is pretty cool. It's still going to be soft. I guarantee you it's still going to be soft. And just going to use my sharp probe there, give it a poke. And it's definitely still soft. Just had to confirm that. Now there's a little pinprick mark on it. D is saying, if you like tactile feels of brown, you could try Zeals. The only downside about Zeals is they're very expensive. Zelios for the Felios is what they say, because they're very smooth. The tooling was very, very nice, but they come in at around $1 a switch. So yeah, it's pretty expensive. The mixture that I'm using, so you missed the start of it, but what I'm using is a local product. It's a polyurethane, and it's called Craft Cast, and white, because it turns white, which is great for if you want to actually pigment it. It's a 2-part volume ratio, so it's a 1-for-1. So it's equal parts A, equal parts B. Now you can see how liquid it is. I'm not going to pull the bottle back out again, but maybe I can. I'll do it. So there's 2 parts. One is orange, as you can see, and one is clear. I had originally poured half of it inside these containers to make it easier to use, but I did not realize that these were not able to be airtight, and so over time it actually sucked up moisture and it crystallized. So this is what happens to this particular resin if you let it crystallize. So this is pretty much a waste. It's no good. Now if I actually mix this in with the clear part, the water reacts during the hardening and reaction, and it causes bubbles. It causes a Rice Krispie effect, and this underside of the cap is what you actually experience, because that's the water expanding and vaporizing during the actual reaction. So this is kaput. I don't know how to dispose of it. I haven't actually contacted the company, but I probably should at some point to say, what can I do with this? Because short of getting the other half of this and chugging it in, and then it going rock hard and going bang perhaps because there's too much water in it, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if the clear that was also in the bottle has had any effect of sitting around absorbing moisture either, because it was in the same type of container. Okie dokie. Rightio. Looks like an arrow. Delicious. Yes, indeed. We do get arrows over here, but I think some places probably don't have arrow chocolate. So what's the time? What's the time? How are we going on time? It's 5:26. Okay. All good. You just want one heavier switch for the spacebar. Okay. You like clicky switches. You bought a brown for carrying around to classes so it can't be too loud. Yeah, well, definitely you can either just buy one extra switch, or somebody locally in your community might be able to just send you one, or you can, you know, spring swap. Depends. If there's a meetup or something like that that you can actually get to, that would be really good, because typically anyone who's got spares could come to the meetup, and if you arrange it beforehand, they can just pass it to you and save you the postage. So, yeah. MX clears or greys would be really good for that. New springs. If you are going to open and mod switches, what I do highly recommend is you can get yourself a switch opener. So here is an example of switch openers. Now this show is in no way sponsored by Mechanical Keyboards, but they are a vendor of products, and this is actually their switch opener. So it's two bits of metal that are bent, that have the right thickness, and essentially you get a switch, and if it's mounted in a keyboard with a switch openable plate or not, what you can do is you can basically get that and you just put it down the two sides. If it's a switch openable switch, which these cows are not. Good one. Had to pick, of course, the switch that I couldn't open. So yeah, so this cherry one has these ports on the side, which, see if they'll focus. So these two bits here would fit into that slot, as they do, just like that. And then you put both, leverage them together, and it lifts the top off. Now, Chocon is asking, did you ship those from the US? Yes, I did ship them from the US. They actually came as part of a bigger package full of other stuff that Jolly Green Giant was very, very kind to proxy for me, so I didn't pay horrendous amounts of shipping just for a set of switch openers, which is ludicrous. Ludicrous. Very new to keyboards, don't know who else likes them. Everyone thinks you're nuts for buying mechanical keyboards. Where do you live? Where are you in your local area? Joseph, are you US? Are you UK? And if you're in US, where in the US are you? You can pick up cheap switch testers that you can pick whatever you like best. Yes, excellent idea. You can get them either at shops that have them, or you can get them from the community vendors as well, because there are guys who buy them in bulk and 3D print testers or get plates cut for them, and then they put them together with a whole wide range, because you'll find a lot of vendors won't necessarily have some of the more non-gaming switches, which makes it a lot harder to actually try some of the non-standard switches. Now I'm still poking this. It is firmed up, but it's still quite soft. So, oh, dude, you're in Australia, Queensland. Dude. Are you on Facebook? Because if you're on Facebook, get to the Australian Mechanical Keyboard Facebook group, and there is heaps of people there that will be more than willing to send you random switches. And you know, if you're not also on the Discord, get on the Discord channel as well, because in Australia, we're all over the place. We've just had the Sydney meetup. Melbourne's having another meetup. The guys in Queensland have been dragging their feet. They've wanted to meet up, but... Am I back? I'm back. Right. I think. What happened there? I'm so scared. Okay, so the stream is back. I hate it when that happens. Yeah, so Mendez is right. Heaps of people are going to jump in and send a switch or two. Someone please shoot him a Discord link. Yeah, YouTube died for some reason. I don't know what exactly happened there. Do not know. Actually, what I'm going to do, my hand is clean over here, is I'm going to... There you go, Mendez. You can chuck him a link if you want to, because I've just given you the crown power. So this is firming up quite nicely. It's soft-ish if I press firmly, but it is actually quite firm. So what I'm going to do is the scary part now, and I'm actually going to demold the main keycap, but not pull the stem yet. Okay, so we're just going to peel the sides. There's a little bit of cracking sound, which is okay, and proof is in the pudding. Yeehaw! Check it out. Crown of power. All right, we have the first ever casted in white, if it's going to focus, polyurethane Movember Keycap 2017. Now you'll still see it's pulled out even more of the bits and pieces that were stuck in the mold. It looks really clean, actually. It doesn't look like there's any major bubbles or faults in it. And it looks like the sprues have kind of done their job, because you can see on the sides the actual sprue channels have had resin go up. Most of them. That one didn't. And two of those ones did. The corner one didn't. And then that one did as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to try and pop out the stem. It's still a little bit soft, but I'm hoping that it is sufficiently firm to get this out. The reason why I want to do it before it fully hardens is because it's actually easier to get the stem out when it's slightly soft. But if it's still quite soft inside and you pull it, you're actually going to stretch and deform it. It's quite an art to picking the right amount of time. If you leave it too long and it gets hard and brittle, it gets very hard to actually take that stem out. So I'm fairly confident, but also because I've applied the lubricant to it, I've applied the Vaseline, that we should probably get an okay pop out. So I've just run the Allen key through it. You can see it still fits in my hand quite well. There's good clearance gap there, and I'm just going to use my thumb and my other fingers, and we're going to try and look at that, just fell straight out. Barely had to touch it, which is very good. Okie dokie. So that came out really clean. And let's hold that up. You can see, is it going to focus? Come on. Come on, camera. There we go. Look at that. There's the crucifix, and you can see all the Vaseline that is actually still left inside the mold, which is exactly what we wanted it to do, is to help us release that stem. So that's pretty nifty. So success. Now, this thing here is a wood carving tool, but it's also really good for casting with, because it allows me to actually get inside and cut and trim these excess columns on the synth. Because what I want to do is I just want to break the connection to the center stem. There's a very, very fine connection there. And then I can actually lift this section out. So I've just gone and cut those bits and see how I can pull all of that out. Look at that. Just pops right out because I've been able to cut that. So I'm just going to trim that off as well. And you can see where the actual sprue holes have come all the way to the top. So that goes into the bin. And then over on this side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just run the blade along the bottom here to free it. the reason why I want to do that is because if you don't and you try and push from the bottom, sometimes if it's holding... Excuse me for a moment. Hello. Oh, I'm going well, thank you. By the way, you are on a live stream. They can't hear you, but yeah. What's up? Okay, no worries. I'll let the others know. Well, no, I'll let them know, and we'll probably hop on Talisman or something like that until you get on, or, yeah, whatever. That's fine. Don't worry about it. Hey, look, that's just how life is, yeah? Alright, don't rush. Okay. Alright, cheers, mate. Bye. So that was just a call from one of my buddies telling me that he's actually on a plane, which means he's going to be very late for our Friday night D&D sessions. So, yeah. Anyway, the show must go on. So what I've just done is, I was just saying that I actually get the blade and I run it through the bottom here to separate and lift, because if you try and push from the bottom, if you watch Binge's Instagram video when he demonstrates the use of the synth and demolding the cap, he gets like a rod and he puts it in and he goes, and it pops out the actual cap. If the sprues are still connected, it can actually stop the cap from coming out, and then you'll damage the stem and crush it and all that kind of stuff. So it's always a good idea to separate it. Now in this instance, it's actually come out really clean, really easily, because the sprues are lifting with it. But if the sprues weren't lifting with it, what I would do is I would actually cut at the sprue before I lifted and pulled off the cap. And there we go. So it's come out. We still got the sprues. It's still soft. Okay, it's still quite soft, because you can see that I can actually wobble bits on it. But on initial inspection, we already know that the top surface is good. And if we look on the inside surfaces, if I can convince the camera to focus, come on, concentrate. You can do it. Be a good camera. Probably moving too much for it. There we go. It's a little bit deformed on the actual stem, but that's probably because of my not clean application of lubricant. First time trying to do it, and you'll see there's a little bit of bubbles on the inside surface, but that's because of my mixing. And once again, if you had a pressure pot, or if you actually put it through vacuum, but 3 minutes is not a long time to put it through vacuum, you wouldn't get those bubbles forming. So that actually turned out pretty well. I think that's actually pretty cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that aside. I'm going to let that harden up. Just going to put that aside, let that harden up. So that was how you cast with the 2.0. It seems fairly straightforward. The Vaseline trick definitely worked with the 2.0, and it definitely worked with the stem. Now you'll see, as I've pulled it up, as I've lifted it out, come on, focus. Oh, it's focusing on the wrong things. It's probably not easy to see on this until it gets into focus. You gonna do it? This is the problem with using webcams as opposed to actual video cameras, where you can change the focus. Okay, there we go. You can see the tails of the Vaseline have been pulled up with it, and that's just how it works. But I probably didn't have a very clean flat bottom edge, which is why some of that surface is a bit rough and gunky. So it's good to know that my technique, when I actually don't rush it as such, turns out to be okay. And we can also see, of course, on my Dunsey one that it's also hardened up. Now, we're going to do the same thing again, but with the synth 1.2. So everything's prepared. We still have resin, and the mold should fit exactly the same. So we'll give that a try. And then we can hold them up side by side and see if there's actually any visible differences between them. So once again, I'm going to draw up. I've got quite a lot of excess today, but that's okay. Push that down. We're going to go with 3 mil again, so 1.5. Hit that down. And then there's my other 1.5. Yeah, there's a lot of variables in getting a clean cast. The materials that you work with is really important. The quality materials, your environmental effects, like temperature, humidity, you know, the mixing is also really important. How you mix it. Obviously, if you have something that's very long curing, you have a greater chance of getting rid of bubbles. You know, if you use pressure pots, you can just suppress those bubbles into tiny, tiny, tiny bubbles, and you can get those beautiful water clear transparent casts. Yeah, it's just a great big world out there. Now you can hide a lot of those issues by using opaque resins and coloring. The colors that I have that I showed the other week, because Remote Ferret was asking about it, the PSTFs don't mix well with this particular resin. The resin just doesn't like it. The resin just says, you know what, you got too much water content in there, I'm going to create bubbles, and away it goes. I do actually use a transparent resin, but I'm not using it for the casting of these simply because it's a 24-hour cure time, just like my silicone. If I put it in, you guys wouldn't see anything, and then I have to do another part 2. Not that I would have a problem with doing that, but obviously it doesn't work very well for a live stream. That one I get much better bubble-free results because it has a 15-minute gel time. So in 15 minutes, I can actually tap it and I can get a lot of the bubbles to come to the surface, which means I get a much cleaner bubble-free keycap at the end of it. It is a clear one, but I don't get water clear because I don't have pressure, so all the micro bubbles are still hanging in there and they reflect light and cause it to go sort of milky, opaque-ish. So I'm going to fill most of that mold, not all the way, most of it. I'll put that there for the moment. I'm going to balance that on top of that one. Is it going to fall over? Maybe. Nope. Okay. And now get my synth, make sure I've got the right orientation, and in it goes. So we're just checking the backwards compatibility of these two, and it fits, it goes in, which is great. And then now the remainder of the mix, I'm just going to dump into the middle. Okay, so I've gone and filled that into the middle, and then the leftovers can go into there. Now it is starting to thicken up now, it's starting to gel up, it's starting to get stringy, so I do need to move and get the cruciform, the crucifix in. So there's the crucifix, get that lined up and wiggle, 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 and it's down. Alrighty, so you'll see in this one we've also got a bit of resin that's kind of come out from those sprue holes, like it should. It's great, and it's a much snug fit because of that tape that I put in, and you'll see actually just there on that left hand edge a bit of that tape's bulged up because of how tight it is. And I'm getting resin on my finger, and that's why I wear a glove. Okay, so now I'm just going to leave that there. It's going to do its thing and cure out. I'm going to clean that so it can do its thing and cure out on this tissue paper. Cool bananas. Yeah, so now we've got another 15 minutes of waiting. What else do you guys want to talk about? Anything? Nothing? Bueller. Is there anything that you guys want us to talk about this week during this week's episode, which we'll be recording not tonight, but tomorrow night? Normally, we put in stuff that's happened through the week, things that have been hot on the list, anything that we found interesting or stuff that we thought about that we'd want to talk about. But if you do have any topics that you want us to talk about, if you think that's something that we might have opinion on or address, you can always pop me a message on Reddit, u/flaread, or you can also throw it to Kevin, which is at u/thesircheddar. Alternatively, you can email me at theboardpodcast@gmail.com. Now we just play more of the waiting game. I'm gonna just twiddle my thumbs. Now I still have quite a bit of resin here. Not quite sure what I'm going to do with it, but let's see what I've got lying around mold-wise. Not really much that I've got lying around. I mean, I've got this going, and I've got I had a mold that I made which was experimental, which was like a firefly, but it didn't turn out very well, so yeah. Am I running a group buy for a board? No, I'm not running a group buy. Anyone want to clarify what that topic was about? I did start watching the top clack, but I didn't get to finish watching that top clack. Is it the most recent one with Alex at Pank, or is it the one with Sir Cheddar that you're talking about? The puzzlement on my face is real. The split, the delta split. So I had been in a group buy for the delta split, and I got the PCB and I got the components, but I've actually found out that I'm 16 switches short, which kind of really sucks. I had issues with trying to 3D print the plate, which that I had some videos about where I 3D printed it and it didn't fit, and then I went and did that wacky crazy design, which then I printed it and it still didn't fit, and then I filed it down and now it actually fits, and then I counted I needed 86 switches, and I've only got 70, so I'm actually short 16 switches. I might put in like some greens or blues, or I don't know yet. I haven't come to that decision. The one today, Alex at Pank, I actually haven't watched it, so I don't know what they're talking about. If they're running a board and I'm running a group buy, it'd be lovely if someone told me about it. I know that Alex has spoken to us before in helping him out in promoting it, getting it as a topic to talk about, to show off, and I've said we're more than happy to do that because we are a community-based podcast. So, and it goes to you guys as well. If you have anything in particular that you want us to shout out, whether it's keyboard related, not keyboard related, if it's your work related, if it's private enterprise or whatever, some project that you're working on, just let us know. And if it's appropriate for the community in terms of it's not like R-rated or anything like that, then we're more than happy to help promote that. Okay. Okay, so they might be talking about my actual case that I did for the Delta split, but I didn't realize there was a group buy happening for it. Were they showing off pictures that I had, or what? I'm really confused. Do I still need the gloves? Yes, I do still need the gloves, but that's okay. I have more gloves. So it's always satisfying to take off gloves. So here's my Delta split box. This is my 3D printed Delta split case. I don't know what they were talking about. They might be bagging it out or something, but this is my off the wall design and case. So it's corners and supported edges. It doesn't interfere with any of the ports, so it doesn't interfere with the Pro Micro or the actual TRS, and the switches go through it obviously as normal, and then you would solder it on, and everything is supported by the solder points. Now, I have tested this by putting it on a surface, and I have typed on the switches, and it's more than sufficiently strong enough to hold it, in the sense that it is a 3mm thick plate with 1.5mm sections for the switch to actually clip into. And in theory, I haven't tested it yet, which is why I said in theory, but you know what? Let's test it on Livestream. I designed it to be switch openable. Why did I design it to be switch openable? I don't know, because I could. So we'll try it on this little bottom one here. And this is how the switch open tool works. You just get it into the two corners, and then you squeeze carefully, gently, I suppose. And it seems like my tolerances were too tight to get the top off. Yeah, okay. So even though I designed it for switch top opening, it's a little bit too tight. It honestly doesn't surprise me, because the shrinkage factor on all dimensions of my design were a bother. So the fact that the switch tops don't come off cleanly either is not unexpected. And my daughter is woken up from her nap again and is gonna get cranky and start crying. However, that's okay, because that's what babies do. If you don't have kids, I'm not going to preach you about having kids or not having kids, but I can tell you they make for interesting times. Make for interesting lives. So that's one half. And then this is the other half of it. So once again, I've got corner pieces and I've got the edge. And with some creative design and sanding, they also mate. So it forms the full sized board, just like that. So at some point, I will get around to building it. But, of course, the biggest problem, like I mentioned just before, is I don't have enough switches if I wanted to keep it all one switch type. So, yeah, that's my biggest issue right now. Alrighty, now we can see that it's actually turned white while we were chatting about that and getting a little bit confused. Other things that are coming up on this particular channel for YouTube is I still have a Delta split to build, and I have a hand-wired 40% to build as well, plus the Delta split. So I've actually got 3 keyboard kits to build. I actually received in the mail yesterday a second-hand Yihua 936 soldering station. Yep. Now, it's a lot bigger than I actually anticipated, in that I thought the base units were a little bit smaller, and it's a decent size. So if you've never had a soldering station, compare it to the size of my head. It's like maybe half the size of my head. It's got a good amount of heft to it. It looks like it's in really good condition. It's just the Chinese sort of clone of the Hako, and you can see they've got kerning issues because it's not a soldering station, it's a soldering station. This is an analog version, of course, and the 936 Hakko is supposedly one of the best units out there ever in the analog version. And the Yihua is a knockoff of that, so the tips, in theory, should actually match if you wanted to get either or. It does have a wand, and as a packet of tips, I bought it on Gumtree, which is like an Australian version of Craigslist kind of thing. It's like a secondhand buy, sell, trade website. And then the guy was selling it for 25 bucks with the tips. And I've got his original invoice, and I've seen the eBay listings for exactly the same stuff that he bought. And even paying postage, I paid $10 postage for this thing, and it weighs like 1.5 kilos. Does it say? No, 2 kilos, 2.14 kilos. I still save 35 bucks compared to if I bought it new. So if it dies, you know, okay, it's 35 bucks down the drain, but if it works really well, fantastic. So at some point, I'll put this together and give it a test run and build a keyboard with it. And I also have a TS100, which is one of those micro pen soldering irons that use like a laptop power supply in the back instead of just a standard one. It looks a deal bigger than the Hakko one you have. Okay. Yeah, that's cool. I would love to have a Hakko, but even second-hand ones in Australia are hard to find and quite expensive. And of course, you know, especially if you're trying to look at the digital range these days, you're not 100% sure if you're getting a real or fake. So analog one would be pretty cool. I know that you've shown listings from Yahoo Japan, but the problem with that is it's 110 power supply or 120 power supply compared to Australian 240. So then buying a transformer and all of that just adds in a cost and weight and space. And, you know, this desk space that I have is pretty limited as it is. You had one of those. What did you do with it, Mendez? Okay, let's poke it and see how... Yeah, it's pretty firm. So, now, these grey gloves, by the way, are nitrile gloves. If we're going to be talking about personal protective equipment, it's always worthwhile to buy better if you can afford better, because it's personal protective equipment. Latex gloves, there's good latex gloves, there's bad latex gloves. There's nylon gloves, and then there's nitrile gloves, and then there's even higher grade of gloves. Now, I know this is a little bit off tangent, but nitrile gloves are more chemically resistant than latex gloves. And you can get biologically protective gloves as well. So it's important because no glove material is impermeable. It's very important to remember that. The difference between a nitrile glove and a latex glove is how fast stuff gets through the glove. If you're working with solvents, that's where it matters. Now, we're not working with solvents, so it doesn't matter that much. However, nitrile gloves are naturally thicker and more durable and more tear resistant than latex gloves. Nitrile gloves for solvents like ethanol and acetone or EDTA or and mech or whatnot, aldehydes, is slower to penetrate. So if you have a spill and there's stuff on your hands, the first thing you do is you don't just go, well, wave it off and let it dry, is you peel off your gloves because it stops it from going through. But you can't do that immediately if you're holding glassware or you're doing something in a fume hood, and so the extra seconds of protection from that penetration is what you're getting out of your nitrile gloves. Now, we have Costco here, and I bought a box of 200, so that's 100 pairs of nitrile gloves, and it was, I think from memory, $15. Now, if you're going to be spending hundreds of dollars on synths, on resins, on silicone, on tools, you can spare $15 to get yourself good gloves to protect your own health. So, yeah. Came back from holidays and it didn't turn on. Well, you could have always opened it up and checked it out, right? Surely. So now, I think that's probably firm enough, just because with the poke test, it's not super deforming. So we're going to pop that out. Super deforming. So just split the sides and Here we go. That came out nicely. Pretty cool. It's still pulling bits of grey stuff out, so you can see... Focus. Focus. Oh, come on. Yeah. Okay, so you can still see it's still pulling bits of grey out of the mold, but it's a lot less grey stuff that's adhering to the actual sculpt. And if we look at the mold itself now, there's also a lot less grey stuff inside. There still is, you can still see it, but after 2 casts, those bits probably won't come off. They might actually be bound in the silicone, so it's unlikely that they're going to come off. And we can see the original synth definitely works very well in that the sprue channels, because I filled it a lot higher this time, so all the sprue channels look to be fully filled in. Accidentally left it on for hours and hours. The imp inside will escape. Well, I suppose it's either going to be the imp or the black magic smoke, right? I love that phrase, black magic smoke. When a piece of electronics lets go of its black magic smoke, no matter what you do, that smoke never goes back in and it will never work or never work the same again. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get my larger Allen key because it fits the larger one, and we're going to try and pop that out. So is it going to come out just as easy as the other one? There we go. Yep, look at that, just slid right off. But what you'll notice is it took those bits of tape right off. Just came clean off except for one of them. So that's alright, no effort, which is great. We can still see inside here that with the synth 1.2 we've still got a nice crucifix happening there. Using my wood carving tool, I'm going to head in and we're going to break those connections so I can clear it out. I do apologize, I'm not showing that very well on the camera. You can say that I'm not a very sort of pro, super experienced streamer, but that's okay. Okay, so all those bits are off. I'm just going to trim these flat. So if it does pull through, then it's going to be okay. Turn that over, and then once again using. Now I'm going to pretend for this particular instance that it is actually not going to come out cleanly, and I'm going to actually cut the sprues. So you can see the edge there. There we go. So I'm just cut. So all I've done is I've actually just cut it at that sprue. And then I'm cutting the corner sprue. Now you'll see that Binge does this with a craft knife. Use whatever blade you have, but just do it safely. I like working with these wood carving tools because I have good control of them. But if you're got, you know, X-Acto knives or whatever, then yeah, use them. And you can see as I'm cutting, it's actually lifting it off the center stem anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But that's because it's been well lubricated and it comes clean. So yeah. Now we're gonna grab that cap. I'm gonna see if I can just. Is it gonna wiggle? No. Okay. Let's give that a tilt. Tilt, tilt. Baby's getting cranky because she doesn't want to have clothes on. Now I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to use this Allen key, and I'm just going to try and gently encourage it. Okay, so I know why it's not. It's because there's actually still gunk in here on the side, on this bottom edge on this side. That's actually holding that center stem in. So I'm just going to go in there and clean that off some more. Break those connections. Scrape them out. Alrighty. And then, in theory, yeah, look at that. Came right off. Came right off. So, there we go. That's what it looks like when it comes out. I'm going to focus. It's probably, there we go. So, still bubbles from the mixing. The top surface is a bit rough because it's being cut from those connections. And what you would do with this is you would just sand it down. You would just, you know, get a bit of flat sandpaper, wet and dry, whatever, and you would just run it back and forth and you would clean it, or if you had a polishing wheel, you know, that kind of thing. But now we have one cast from the 1.2 or thereabouts and the 2. So there is the 1.2 on this side and there is the 2 on this side. And if we have a look at them side by side, if I can get that to come up and focus, you'll notice straight away this is the same mold. The wall thickness is significantly different. Look at that. Same mold, but what this means is the actual 2.0, the base, the internal base is thicker. It's wider, which means the outside section is thinner and it doesn't have as much material. So you got to be very careful about that, which means your cap is not going to be as thick compared to previously. So if you're running materials that are a little bit, have a tendency to be softer and flex, then I would say be aware of that fact. And if you do pop out caps and people are suddenly saying to you, hey, your caps have suddenly gone really thin, or because of the thickness difference in the walls, the caps will sound different. That's why people like thick walled ABS or PBT caps, because they have a deeper sound in them. So I would say that's not a failing, but it's a consideration in that if you cast with the 2, compared to when you used to make them on the 1 series, the wall is definitely thinner. I wouldn't say quite as thin as half, but probably, you know, 2/3 the thickness of the old thickness. I'm not going to say that it's disappointing, because that doesn't really come into play, but it is just something to be aware about. Now, in terms of testing stem fit, I just need to trim that off. What am I going to do? I'm going to use that just as an anvil. Because it's steel, so I'm not too concerned about hurting it. Just going to trim off those sprues. Okay. Just going to trim off those little bits of random bits. Alrighty. Going to blow some bits off that, and I have a cherry green, which traditionally is quite a stiff fit. It's quite a tight fit cap, and let me get the right orientation, because crucifixes do have an orientation, and there is the fit. So there it goes onto the cap. Now it does feel really loose. Look at that. I can just, it just comes right off. So now if I do the flick test, where can I do this flick test safely without stuff going into the resin? If I do the flick test this way, 2 pops and it's off. So that was the that was the 2. And if I try that with the same, if I try that with the same method on the 1.0 stem, okay, so there's the fit, and 2, 3, and 4. So I actually think that the stem fitment's probably a little bit loose just by feel on how it goes on. The actual keycap is possibly a little bit looser. Look, it's not fallen off on the 1.0 hanging upside down. And if I put it on the 2 and I shake it, it also doesn't fall off. So if I'm pressing it normally, there's no reason why it's going to bounce. It's only going to happen if I actually flick the cap. I'm attributing that to because I was quite liberal with the Vaseline, so the actual thickness of the crucifix when it was cast is going to be an issue. 2, these probably still haven't fully cured. 3, there might be some Vaseline on it still, which is going to lubricate it. And 4, Binge himself has said and admitted that when they do cast, some of their stems are a little bit on the looser side, and they do apply what he calls a paint material which thickens and increases the actual grip inside the crucifix. Now, I don't know what that material is, but it's a spray. They spray it, which helps the stem actually hold. They would rather do that than to have it so tight on everything to ensure tightness that it cracks and breaks, which is what we know can happen when you cast with resins. I'm just going to clean this out. Bear with me. And I'm just going to punch out these sprues that are still chilling inside there as well. So okay, so now my synth is clean and ready to go again if I was going to do more casting, which right now I'm not going to, because I've just gone and done 2 casts. Okie dokie, just going to put my Vaseline away. I think that's pretty much it in terms of doing the first cast of the Movember caps. The sculpt I think works really well. It turned out looking nice. The detail held. I don't think the mold was damaged in either casts, which looks pretty good. So moving on from here, I am going to probably start casting these with the 24-hour stuff, which is going to be the translucent material, only because I do get slightly better physical results. I won't have the same color sort of options in that it won't be opaque with pastel colors. It's just going to be, you know, sort of those resin colors. I'm not sure what's going to happen with thinner and thicker caps. Yeah, ideally, you'd want them to be exactly the same for consistency. I do have 2 synths. I could make another mold, and I could cast 2 at the same time, which would be great, but I don't know. I'm still a little bit undecided because it was unexpected. I hadn't measured the actual center base, but finding out that the 2.0 does have a thinner wall, I prefer the thicker wall, to be honest, but that's just me. I don't know if they realized that when they did it. Maybe they did, but I won't say that I'm disappointed because we don't know the reasons why they went that way, but some people might find that a turn-off. What can you do? What can you do? So there you go. Now I have 2 Movember caps. Ready to go. Just have to get washed to get rid of any of the excess Vaseline, and I don't know if they'll get any firmer, but for sure, the resin ones should turn out a little bit nicer. Okie dokie. So thank you very much for coming along, hanging out with me for, I don't know how long it's been now since my OBS timer reset when I had that disconnect. But thank you very much anyway for hanging out and chatting while we were waiting for these things to cure. I hope that you watching this has given you a sense and an idea of what it takes to actually cast a keycap with a synth. And of course, this is all done under what's called gravity casting because there's no pressure pots involved. I'm working with relatively cheap, and I do stress relatively cheap, resins. The stuff from Smooth On and Illuminite and some of the other brands are a lot more expensive, but you get very different results. So the quality of materials that you work with will absolutely guaranteed will make a difference as well. So just going to pop its little protective slip on it. And there you go. Do we have any questions while I sort of clean up and pack up a little bit here? Otherwise, yeah, we might call it a day and wrap. So, and when I say wrap, I mean finish. I don't mean rhythmic American poetry, because not that I don't appreciate it or don't like it, I'm just not a rapper. But if that's something that you want to see on Patreon, want to see me rapping, maybe we can make that happen. I don't know. How crazy would that be? the Board Podcast wrap. Yo, yo. I still don't know what I'm going to do with this excess. I'm not going to put it back into the main containers because that's bad practice. Definitely, once you've taken stuff out, you should never put it back in. Make sure my containers are nice and tight. Yo, how's it going, Alexander? Thanks very much for coming along. If you've just joined us, then it's a little bit unfortunate because obviously it's towards the end of the stream. You've redacted your message, but I didn't think it was a problem for you to say yo. It's kind of funny because my wife's given the baby a metal bowl and a wooden spoon, so she's out there happily bashing on it. I can foresee headaches to come. Maybe not from me, maybe for my wife. All right. Well, nobody's really saying anything, so I don't know if that's because the stream is broken or died, or if my volume settings aren't working, but everything looks like it's working. So I think we're going to call it there. Thank you once again for coming along. If you haven't, I would love for you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, share my videos. Don't forget, we have the 700 subscriber giveaway running right now, and it's the last of the Movember caps that I've got available to give away, and it's the 2016 Red Nose Mo, which is this little fellow here in the MX cap, in the MX stem style, sorry. And I'm very thankful to know that Brandon from New Zealand, who won the last one with the New Zealand Greenstone, actually finally got it in the mail. So that will happen on the 12th. So we're probably going to do a live stream for that next week if we can, to do the drawing for it, and then whoever wins it wins it. That's it. GG. When we get to 800, I actually don't know if we're going to do a giveaway for 800. Depends on what we can wrangle up. And once again, if you got any thoughts and ideas about what you'd like to see for us from Patreon accounts, maybe we haven't got one yet, but if you want to give us ideas, we're definitely going to do that. Think about it at least before we go out there, and we also will need to think about what we're going to do with our funding, where our goals lie. So Remote Ferret, great. Thanks for popping in. We're actually wrapping up already because it's been, you know, a while now, but you can always go back and check the video out on demand, and it is probably of interest to see how you do your casting compared to how I do my casting. So good night, sleep well, and yeah, hopefully you'll be able to check out the video at a later stage. So yep, so we've ticked off subscribers, giveaway, of course our podcasts you can find on www.theboardpodcast.com. You obviously know where the YouTube channel is, and if you're not part of the mechanical keyboard community on Reddit, please head over there. If you're an Australian, you can also go to the Australian Facebook page for mechanical keyboards, and we've also got the Discord channel too. Rightio. Still got 9 people hanging around, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to say goodbye now. I'm going to count to probably 20-ish, and then I'm going to cut the stream because of that weird delay that I still haven't figured out. So thank you. And of course, as usual, get my mouse over the stop streaming part. Happy clacking. And a 1, and a 2, and a 3, and a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20.